December 1941, a nameless road on the Eastern Front. Snow packed hard by wheels and boots. The night smells of cold fuel and exhaust. In the dark, a column moves forward with its lights masked. Trucks, a few half-tracks, men hunched in their coats, rifles slung, breath crystallizing before it vanishes. In a shallow ditch beside the road, 2 Soviet soldiers lie still. Between them rests a long, brutal tool of steel and wood. A single-shot anti-tank rifle. Its barrel is rimmed with frost. One man watches the lead vehicle. The other grips a heavy 14.5mm round like a small piece of artillery. The first shot is not loud at first, just a flat crack swallowed by winter, until metal sparks, a truck lurches, and the column begins to fold into itself. Every day, we tell real stories from World War II. By subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell button, you help preserve these stories for future generations. By the winter of 1941, the war in the East had already consumed its illusions. Operation Barbarossa, launched in June, had shattered borders and assumptions alike. German armies had crossed into the Soviet Union with speed unmatched in modern warfare. Entire Soviet formations were encircled and destroyed. Cities fell. Millions of soldiers were killed or captured. By autumn, German columns were driving deep toward Moscow, supplied by long, exposed roads stretching back hundreds of kilometers. But speed had a cost. German logistics depended on constant movement. Fuel, ammunition, food, replacement vehicles, most of it carried by trucks and lightly armored half-tracks. Railheads lagged behind the front. Roads became arteries of survival, and every kilometer forward thinned German control of the ground on either side. For the Red Army, 1941 was a year of emergency decisions. Factories were evacuated east. New units were raised with minimal training. Weapons were simplified, standardized, and rushed into service. Among them was the ptrd 41 anti-tank rifle, a long, heavy, single-shot weapon firing a powerful 14.5mm cartridge. It was crude by design. No magazine, no recoil buffer, no comfort. But it could be built fast, issued fast, and learned fast. German soldiers often dismissed it. By late 1941, newer German tanks could resist its fire from most angles. Against frontal armor, the rifle was ineffective. Against heavy tanks, it was nearly useless. In the language of mechanized war, it appeared obsolete almost as soon as it arrived. But war does not unfold on paper. The ptrd was not meant to fight tanks alone. It was issued to 2-man teams and pushed forward with infantry. Its true value lay elsewhere, against thin armor, exposed components, and vehicles never designed to be shot at with anti-armor weapons at all. Trucks, fuel carriers, half-tracks, command vehicles. On the Eastern Front, these were everywhere. As winter closed in, the front slowed, engines failed, columns compressed onto narrow roads. Movement became predictable, and in the forests, villages, and snow-filled ditches along those roads, Soviet soldiers learned how to turn a stopgap weapon into a tool of ambush. The rifle, waiting beside the frozen road, was part of that learning curve. It was not there to duel tanks. It was there to stop a column. As the war ground into winter, the battlefield changed its rules. Snow erased landmarks. Ice hardened roads into narrow corridors of movement. Vehicles could no longer disperse across open ground. Columns bunched together, slowing to walking speed as engines strained against the cold. A single disabled truck could halt everything behind it. German doctrine prized momentum, but winter punished it. The Red Army adapted accordingly. Anti-tank rifle teams were no longer positioned to stop armored breakthroughs head-on. Instead, they were embedded into infantry screens, village defenses, and roadside kill zones. Their task shifted from destroying tanks to shaping movement, forcing columns to stop, compress, and panic. The ptrd 41 made this possible. Its 14.5mm round, travelling at high velocity, could punch through the thin side armour of half-tracks, penetrate engine blocks, shatter axles, and ignite fuel tanks. Even when it failed to penetrate, the impact alone could disable a vehicle or wound exposed crewmen. Against trucks packed with men or supplies, the effect was devastating. German soldiers learned this quickly, though not always soon enough. A stopped lead vehicle trapped everything behind it. A hit to a rear vehicle sealed the column in place. Machine guns could sweep the ditches, but muzzle flashes gave away their positions. In darkness or snowfall, identifying the source of a single-shot rifle was difficult. By the time return fire found the right patch of snow, the rifle had already shifted. For the Soviet crews, the work was brutal. The rifle weighed over 17 kilograms. Recoil was violent. After each shot, the breech snapped open, ejecting a smoking casing that burned bare hands in. The cold. Ammunition was heavy and limited. Firing positions had to be chosen carefully, because survival depended on disappearing after every shot. But the weapon fit the moment. It required no optics, no complex maintenance, no supply chain beyond ammunition. It rewarded patience and punished predictability. It allowed two soldiers, often barely trained, often exhausted, to exert influence far beyond their numbers. German reports from the winter of 1941-42 increasingly noted losses to small hidden teams using anti-tank rifles against transport and support vehicles. The rifle was no longer judged by whether it killed tanks. It was judged by what happened when a column stopped moving. And on a frozen road, with night closing in and engines idling too long, that judgment came quickly. The rifle in the ditch was already aligned on its first target. The men behind it were waiting for the column to commit. The moment before contact was almost silent. The human reality of the anti-tank rifle team was measured in seconds. One man watched the road, the other managed the weapon. They spoke rarely, if at all. Breath fogged the sights. Fingers numbed inside wool gloves that had to be peeled back before loading a round. Every movement had to be deliberate, because the rifle did not forgive mistakes. The gunner absorbed the recoil with his whole body. Each shot slammed into shoulder and collarbone like a hammer blow. After 3 or 4 rounds, pain became constant. Hearing dulled, vision narrowed. But the loader kept the rhythm. Round in, breech closed, eyes already searching for the next target. Fear was constant, but it was controlled. They were not chasing glory. They were not waiting to duel tanks. Their task was simple and unforgiving. Stop the road. Tactically, the ambush began with restraint. The first vehicle was allowed to pass. So was the second. The team waited for the moment when the column could no longer react cleanly, when distance closed, spacing collapsed, and engines strained together in the cold. Only then did the rifle speak. The ideal first target was not armoured. It was essential. A fuel truck, a lead transport carrying engineers, a command vehicle with antennae rising into the night. One shot into an engine block could do more than a dozen rounds into armour. The goal was paralysis. Once the column stopped, the geometry of the road worked against it. Vehicles could not turn. Drivers abandoned cabs. Men spilled onto the snow, seeking cover that did not exist. Machine guns fired blind into darkness. Tracers marked fear more than targets. The rifle fired again, not rapidly, not recklessly. One shot, then stillness. A shift of position, another shot from a new angle. Each impact compounded confusion. Each disabled vehicle reduced the enemy's options. From the German perspective, the weapon felt impossible to pin down. There was no sustained fire to triangulate, no clear muzzle flash, just isolated, brutal impacts, appearing along the length of the column. The road became a funnel of noise, smoke, and wounded men. For the two soldiers in the ditch, time stretched. The ambush did not feel cinematic. It felt slow, heavy, and exhausting. But it was working, and as the column locked in place, the rifle's true purpose revealed itself. Not as a tank killer, but as a breaker of movement. Technological angle and leadership, moral angle, 350 words. Technologically, the ptrd-41 was honest to the point of brutality. It was a single-shot rifle, firing the 14.5 WAS 140mm cartridge, one of the most powerful small-arms rounds of the war. The projectile left the barrel at high velocity, delivering enough kinetic energy to punch through thin steel, shatter cast components, and tear through engines never designed to face such force. Against the side armor of half-tracks or the structural metal of trucks, it was lethal. Against exposed crews, it was catastrophic. But the weapon had limits, and its crews knew them. Armor thickness increased rapidly as the war progressed. Sloped steel defeated penetration. At longer ranges, accuracy dropped. Against modern tanks, the rifle could not be relied upon. What it offered instead was precision, at close distance, and the ability to target vulnerabilities that doctrine often ignored. This forced a shift in leadership thinking. Soviet commanders learned to stop measuring success by destroyed tanks alone. An immobilized supply column achieved results. Armor kills could not. Fuel lost meant engines silent tomorrow. Ammunition destroyed meant artillery idle at the front. A single road closed for hours could ripple outward, disrupting entire formations. Morally, the weapon carried weight on both sides. For Soviet infantry, it represented agency. In a war often defined by overwhelming German firepower, the rifle allowed small teams to strike back decisively. It restored a sense of balance, not equality, but influence. Two men, correctly positioned, could change the shape of a fight. For German troops, the effect was corrosive. Columns that had once moved with confidence now slowed. Ditches were watched, engines were cut early. Men rode with weapons in hand rather than slung. The road itself became suspect. The fear was not of tanks emerging from the dark, but of a single, unseen shot that could ignite a truck or drop a driver without warning. This was not a technological revolution, it was a psychological one. The ptrd did not dominate the battlefield, it haunted it. It forced attention downward, toward the margins of the road, where two soldiers, with an outdated rifle, waited patiently. And on this night, that patience was about to be rewarded. The column was fully committed. The lead vehicle was in range. The shot came when the column could no longer undo its own movement. The lead truck lurched as the round struck low and hard, tearing into the engine block. Steam burst upward, followed by smoke. The driver fought the wheel for a second before the vehicle slewed sideways, blocking half the road. Brakes locked behind it. Engines revved and died in a chain reaction of confusion. The rifle's breech snapped open. A casing flew back into the snow, hissing as it burned. The loader was already feeding the next round. The gunner shifted his weight, angling the barrel a few degrees down the road. A second shot. This one found a fuel carrier. The impact punched through thin metal and ruptured a line. Fuel spilled, then ignited. Fire rolled outward, lighting the road in orange and black. Men scattered, silhouettes running across the snow as machine guns began firing wildly into the darkness. The column had stopped moving, orders were shouted, but engines and gunfire swallowed them. German infantry spilled from trucks, searching for cover that did not exist along the hard-packed road. Half-tracks swung their guns toward the ditches, stitching the snow with tracer fire. The rifle fired again, not at armor, at wheels, at radiators, at the soft places that kept vehicles alive. A rear truck sagged as its axle failed, sealing the column from behind. Now there was no forward, no reverse. Only a trapped mass of metal and men. Return fire intensified. Bullets snapped overhead, cutting into branches and embankments. The team rolled the rifle back, dragging it a few meters along the ditch to a new position. They did not rush. Speed invited mistakes. Mistakes invited death. Another shot cracked the night. A half-track's side plate buckled. The vehicle shuddered, its gun falling silent as the crew bailed out. Smoke thickened. The smell of burning fuel mixed with cordite and frost. Minutes stretched. Each one added to the toll. The Germans were no longer trying to push through. They were trying to survive the road. Wounded men lay where they fell. Some crawling, some still. Officers attempted to organize flanking sweeps, but darkness and uncertainty slowed every step. From the ditch, the rifle team watched the road transform. What had been a supply column was becoming a fixed target. The turning point was not dramatic. There was no single explosion that ended it. There was only the steady realization, spreading through the trapped vehicles, that the road was lost. And that dawn was still hours away. As the night wore on, the balance shifted from chaos to exhaustion. German fire slackened, not from mercy, but from depletion. Ammunition was conserved. Men crouched behind wheels and axles, afraid to expose themselves. Engines were silent now, either disabled or shut down to avoid drawing attention. The road, once loud with movement, settled into a tense, burning stillness. The rifle spoke less frequently, but each shot mattered more. A radio truck took a round through its side panel. The antenna sagged, then fell. Communication along the column fractured further. Isolated groups fought their own private battles in the dark, unaware of what was happening a few vehicles away. At some point before dawn, the firing stopped almost entirely. The Soviet team did not advance. They did not charge the road. That was not their role. Their task was complete. With ammunition running low and the risk of counterattack rising, they withdrew the way they had come, slowly, dragging the long rifle through snow and shadow. When morning came, it revealed the shape of the night's work. The road was scarred with blackened patches where vehicles had burned. Trucks sat twisted and abandoned, doors hanging open. Spent casings littered the snow. Bodies lay where they had fallen, some beside vehicles, others scattered along the verge where they had tried to flee or fight back. Wounded men waited quietly, wrapped in coats, stiff with frost. Recovery parties arrived cautiously. Engineers examined the damage. Officers counted losses. The column would not move again that day. Supplies meant for the front would arrive late or not at all. The Germans had not been defeated in a grand battle. They had been delayed, disrupted, and bled in the margins of the war, on a road that should have been safe. For the Red Army, the result was less visible, but no less real. A rifle team had held ground without holding it. They had shaped the battlefield without occupying it. They had forced a mechanized force to react to infantry, armed with a weapon many had dismissed as obsolete. The lesson spread quietly. Roads were no longer neutral spaces. Transport was no longer untouchable. Every ditch became a potential firing position. Every night, movement carried risk. The rifle did not win the war. But on that road, before dawn, it had decided the outcome of a fight that never appeared on a map. And as the smoke drifted away, the consequences began to settle in. The immediate aftermath was measured in what failed to arrive. Fuel that should have fed engines at the front was burned on the road. Ammunition meant for batteries and infantry companies lay scattered in the snow or consumed in blackened trucks. Food, winter clothing, spare parts, everything a field army required, was now delayed behind a blocked corridor of wreckage. German units were forced into improvisation. Recovery teams moved forward under guard, expecting the ambush to repeat. Engineers worked to tow disabled vehicles, clear burned frames, and reopen a passage without exposing themselves to another hidden rifle. Trucks were dragged aside when they could be moved. When they could not, they were stripped, then abandoned. Every minute spent on the road was a minute not spent advancing or consolidating positions. For the men who survived the column, the psychological effect lingered longer than the smoke. A convoy attack was not like artillery. It was not a distant barrage. It was intimate. It happened at eye level, from unseen positions close enough that the enemy might be only a few meters away. Soldiers learned to fear the quiet between shots, the pause that meant the rifle team was relocating and choosing its next target. On the Soviet side, there was no celebration. Anti-tank rifle teams rarely remained in position after an ambush long enough to see the full result. Their survival depended on withdrawal, not confirmation. They carried the exhaustion with them, bruised shoulders, ringing ears, fingers cracked from cold metal, and the weight of ammunition that was never enough. The weapon itself left its mark. The ptr's recoil could injure the gunner over time. Its muzzle blast revealed position if fired too often. And in winter, any exposed metal could betray movement with a glint of frost. But the ambush validated the doctrine Soviet leaders were learning under pressure. If tanks could not always be stopped, the war could still be shaped by stopping what tanks and infantry depended on: fuel, ammunition, and momentum. The front line would feel the effect within hours, not as a dramatic collapse, as silence. A battery firing fewer rounds, a company waiting for food, vehicles parked with empty tanks. And in war, silence can be as deadly as gunfire. In the months that followed, the role of the anti-tank rifle continued to evolve. By 1942 and 1943, German armor had thickened. New tanks rendered the ptrd largely ineffective as a primary anti-tank weapon. Soviet doctrine adjusted again. The rifle was reassigned, used against half-tracks, armored cars, observation posts, bunkers, and above all, transport. It remained in service, not because it was ideal, but because it was useful. German forces adapted as well. Convoys increased spacing where terrain allowed. Escort infantry walked the verges. Movement shifted toward daylight when possible. Engineers were pushed forward to repair roads quickly. None of this eliminated the threat. It only acknowledged it. The psychological imprint endured. German soldiers learned that superiority in armor and firepower did not guarantee safety. The battlefield extended beyond the front line. Supply routes became contested space. Every pause, every bottleneck, every village crossing carried risk. Soviet commanders drew quieter conclusions. They saw that modern war could still be influenced by small teams acting independently within a larger operational plan. That initiative mattered, that weapons dismissed as temporary could still impose permanent costs on the enemy if used with discipline and patience. The anti-tank rifle did not become a symbol of victory, it became a symbol of adaptation. By the later stages of the war, it was increasingly replaced by more advanced weapons. Rocket launchers, improved artillery coordination, dedicated anti-tank guns. But it never disappeared entirely. It remained where simplicity and reliability mattered more than innovation. In post-war assessments, the ptrd was rarely celebrated. It lacked the dramatic reputation of tanks or aircraft. It did not dominate headlines or memoirs. Yet, its impact can be traced in operational reports and logistical summaries, in delays, shortages, and unplanned halts that shaped campaigns as surely as any battlefield engagement. The road ambushes faded into statistics, but their lessons did not. They reminded every army involved that war is not only decided by breakthroughs and grand offensives, it is decided in the narrow spaces between them. The ambush on the frozen road did not alter maps or decide a campaign. It did something quieter. It exposed the fragile link between power and movement. Armies could field modern tanks, skilled commanders, and disciplined troops, but without fuel, ammunition, and time, those strengths meant little. A war built on speed could be slowed by patience. A force built en masse could be disrupted by two men and a single, unglamorous weapon. The anti-tank rifle was never meant to dominate the battlefield. It was born from necessity, not innovation. Yet, in the conditions of the Eastern Front, necessity shaped outcomes as surely as technology. The rifle's limitations forced its users to think differently, to aim not at symbols of power, but at the systems that sustained it. That lesson outlived the weapon itself. Modern warfare would continue to evolve toward greater complexity, longer ranges, and heavier armor. But the principle endured. Control of logistics, movement, and morale often mattered more than destruction of the enemy's strongest units. On that winter road, the Germans did not lose because they lacked courage or equipment. They lost because momentum failed them. And the soldiers in the ditch did not win because their rifle was modern. They won because they understood where to apply force, when to remain unseen, and when a single shot could matter more than many. History rarely remembers such moments by name, but it is built from them all the same.